And so this series is sponsored by the Goodwin University Institute for Learning Innovation, where Universal Design for Learning is our special expertise, the Goodwin University Center for Teaching Excellence, and the University of Bridgeport Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching. Goodwin and University of Bridgeport are what I would call sister institutions. So we're really excited. And again, please keep your mics muted and use the chat for questions. And if there's something technical that you need that we're struggling with, that we're not aware of, you let us know. So we're recording the session today, and we'll post this to the link once it's all taken care of. We'll post it to our Padlet, and Rob is going to put those links in the chat if he hasn't done so already, because apparently I can't pull the chat up right now. And then we'll also be putting in some other information in the chat. We have a conference coming up on September 27th. This will be our third annual UDL conference. We're really excited about that. We have a blog, a UDL blog at Goodwin. We also will put in the chat the link to all the full recordings of the webinar series. And I'm trying to think of what else will go in there. So look for the chat and look in the chat. And again, please put your questions there. So we have with us today, really excited, colleagues that worked with Rob and I on the Universal Design for Learning teaching, I can't think of the name of it, New Directions for Teaching and Learning volume on UDL. And we have with us today Amber Gentile, who is an associate professor of neurodiversity and special education at Gwynedd Mercy University, and Mary Murphy Budzilowicz, I hope I said that right, Mary, who's an adjunct faculty and teacher education, and she's at Cabrini University. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let them go ahead and share their screens. I don't know who's going to drive, whether it's Mary or Amber, and we'll let them get started, okay?
Hello, everyone. Okay. So we're excited to just share with you the work that Mary and I have done, and we're really focusing on that, obviously, that 9th guideline. And our title is Utilizing the Humanistic Side of Learning. We really believe in the value of humanizing learning, and UDL is such a great framework that allows us to do that. And so it's really focusing on promoting expectations and beliefs that optimize motivation, which we know is so important in learning. So a little bit about us. Diana did a nice introduction. I'm Amber Gentile, and I really love this work. Focusing on, my agenda has always been focused on what works in teaching and learning. For all learners, right? Not for us as instructors, but for the learner. And so I'm always delving into the research about what's been showing to be effective and ways that we can really open it up and ways to empower the learner so that they want to be involved in the process, that they own it, and that they value it, and they recognize the role that they play and the things that they can do to maximize their learning. Mary?
Yeah, hi, and I'm Mary Budzilowicz, and I'm over here at Cabrini University, missing my pal Amber, who is now at Gwynedd Mercy, but some of you may be familiar with the fact that Cabrini will be closing in about 1 month from today's date. This has been a really difficult time. I'm adjunct faculty this semester. Prior to that, I was leading a center where I was working with faculty in the university on Universal Design for Learning. And as Diana mentioned, my own experience, my own background really begins with the birth of my own daughter with disabilities, came through the early intervention system at 9 months of age. And when she found herself in school age services, I found my way to a product called Thinking Reader from CAST, and that began my interest in UDL. And I would also like to say that there's a few people in this session today whom I have followed on Twitter for quite some time now, and who have really advanced my UDL learning. I'm deeply appreciative. And we have a home-based doc for our session. Basically, it contains our agenda, although that's also in the slides as well. You can access the slides, some resources that we have there. Typically, for a smaller gathering, we have some engagement space there, and then sometimes just some follow-up questions if you're interested in reaching out past the presentation.
Yeah, and we also want to note that we have a lot of slides, and so some of them we might move fairly quickly through, but we're hoping that through this home-based doc, you can access them and dig a little deeper if you'd like.
Right. Some of them are examples, implementation examples, and we may not get through all of those today, but they're there for you. And then again, for the most part, we're going to be using chat for today's session, but we also have a Padlet, and we have our home-based doc, and many times I think people can unmute themselves if they really need to do so and share through through audio.
Okay, so to get us started, we would really like you to think about and welcome you to think about what brought you to this space and what you hope to gain from it. And so we just give everybody an opportunity just to quickly introduce yourself in the chat, just so we have an idea of what brought you to this space. And for you personally, just to think about like, what is your personal goal? Because that's something we talk about in empowering learners, is to encourage them to think about those things. And so we just want to model that and give you a time and space to do that. And then we also want to encourage you to think about that humanizing term, right? So the term humanizing learning. So we just want you to start thinking about that as well.
I'm just reading some of the chats that are starting to
Oh, good.
on my end. Thank you. Oh, Mr. Tobin, one of those people that I follow religiously.
This is so exciting seeing everybody who's here. And
yes, absolutely. Oh, Commonwealth U, welcome. This is awesome. Thank you for being here today.
Molly, good luck with that dissertation. Good. Okay.
I agree, Kristen. This whole series has provided such a wonderful foundation in universal design for learning.
Yeah.
Yes, and we're always continuing our UDL development, growth, understanding. I'm excited about the new proposed guidelines.
Yeah, my colleague Peggy Kerr is here, and she could probably run this session. She's so committed to UDL. I'm so impressed with the work that she does through her online courses.
Awesome. Okay.
All right. So I'm glad everybody has taken a moment just to think those through. And hopefully you've had a chance to think about what brings you to, that word humanizing. What does that mean? Like, what kind of things come to mind with that? Okay. And so to share with you, like, again, we really love the UDL framework because I think it really is so deliberate about so many important aspects of that teaching and learning cycle. And they are very cognizant of that effective piece to learning too. And that's what we're really focusing on here with humanizing. So this quote kind of spoke to Mary and I in terms of, yeah, like that's what it's about, right? So humanizing intentionally cultivates a welcomeness to engage through trust, mutual respect, and authentic care. And those things are so pivotal to that effective piece. And, we all know that cognitive piece isn't going to be maximized unless we address that. And that's, so many of us that are educators are drawn to the field because of that human side of it. And the work that we do to instill that trust and really care about each other and create spaces where we can all learn and grow together.
Okay, and our session goals for today are to discuss the ways to customize that learning experience, to support that self-regulation of our learner. We hope to get to the section where we'll show some examples of actionable strategies. And again, address motivational self-regulation strategies in learning spaces and course design.
So those are the goals that we, kind of came up with. But again, remember your own personal ones as well.
Absolutely. And while we have an agenda for today, we want you to know that we are always flexible. We probably have over-planned for this session. So but we'd like to begin with a little bit of theory to practice and then move into some strategies and implementation, and then provide some opportunities at the end for you to connect and extend challenge thinking routine from Project Zero.
And we like to model that, sharing an agenda helps people with that affective piece as well, so they know a little bit of what to expect. They can start to formulate where they fit into all of this and where, and to plan their learning journey. But again, we will provide flexibility with that as well. All right, so what brought Mary and I to this work is, we really recognize that, I came from the K-12 world, went into the higher ed, and I realized that I was seeing some of the, same learning needs in terms of the K-12 world, what they bring in. And then we're recognizing that higher ed also has diverse needs in the classroom, and we need to make our instructional practices reflect that as well. So we're really recognizing that our students have a lot of responsibility outside of the classroom. And that's something that, if we're going to humanize learning, we need to keep in mind, right? And we've also recognizing that there's an increase in diversity, which is a wonderful thing in our student populations. And that's across, races, ethnicities, socioeconomic status, disabilities. And also, unfortunately, mental health challenges have really been present and have really been something that we must address. The research shows that there's high reports of depression, anxiety, overwhelming stress. And I think the pandemic certainly has brought that to the surface and it's something that we need to be deliberate about. So with that, Mary and I really focus on, okay, so we need to have equity goals and we need to really use a holistic approach. And that's where a lot of our work kind of came into play.
Yeah, and our thinking really began back in 2017 when we attended the UDL symposium, UDL and social justice. And we sat there, we thought, we're not doing many of these things. And we have always served a diverse population here at Cabrini. We have a large number of students who identify as neurodiverse. We have always been an institution that has included first-generation students. So Amber and I took a good look at each other and said, we need to be doing the things that these speakers are speaking to. It's critically important.
Right, and to help our colleagues and everybody across institutions to do this work. We were able to recognize a lot of the things right away, having been trained educators. But then to recognize that there were a lot of our colleagues across the institution who aren't trained educators, and they want to do well by their students, but they didn't necessarily have the strategies or the knowledge behind it. So we really felt like we wanted to move this work forward.
And I'm that parent of that generation of students with disabilities who came in through the early intervention system, and as they moved through the years into secondary, suddenly college was an opportunity for them. The door to college was no longer, shut. So those students are very much in our classrooms today, and they deserve our respect.
Absolutely. So the things that we were thinking about in terms of addressing diverse needs in higher ed is that critical piece of creating spaces where all students see themselves, their authentic selves, reflected in the learning experiences. And there's a lot of things that we can do to do that, and we'll get into those. And also to focus on developing those strong emotional connections between the instructors and the students, and also student to student, because you're not going to create safe spaces for learning if those connections aren't there. People need to feel valued, respected, and that they belong there, and others want them to be there in those spaces as their authentic selves. We think it's very critically important to set challenging expectations and high learning outcomes for everyone. So we are not about lowering expectations at all. We are about providing the supports, the beliefs, and the resources to help the students meet those expectations, and to give them the skill set and the wherewithal to know, as self-learners, empower them with strategies and approaches that can help them to reach those expectations. And we always want to encourage student voice and expression. Recognize that it's their journey. They need to be actively involved with it.
And I see we have a question in the chat box, and I so appreciate that question. Even in preparing for today, Tom, I just wasn't sure how to, design this session so that a connection with the audience would be there, even this opportunity to engage and hear your voices. So it is definitely such an important question. And I'm such a novice. I do not have an answer to that question.
Well, Mary, I think a lot of the things, so the question is asking about what to do with large enrolled classes, like how to formulate those connections. And I think a lot of the things that we mentioned later on in terms of language in the syllabus and ways that we set things up can send that message, and being responsive.
Right.
You know, and even in large enrollment classes, if there's any way to respond to people as individuals, I think that those kind of things help. But that is a constant struggle.
Yeah, it is a constant struggle. As you know, you and I am talking about this presentation today.
Yes, we were talking about that. So Mary and I had, many years ago now, started doing some work about, we recognize that universal design for learning brings such value to this work. And so we were thinking about different principles and UDL has done a great job of kind of identifying these things as they've grown and molded the guidelines as well. But we created a crosswork model to kind of guide our practice, and it's grounded in theory, and then we try to move it into specific strategies. So we really try to explicitly connect universal design for learning, obviously, culturally responsive pedagogy, and mindset. And with mindset, we're talking about the learner mindset, but also the teacher mindset. And we use it in terms of the way Dweck does with growth and fixed, but also just in terms of general belief systems and the approach that one takes, the way they go into the teaching and learning process. And these things are heavily influenced by social emotional learning and also trauma-informed practices.
And drawing from the research, also by the book by Ralabate and Lord, I think I said that correctly, I'm not sure. I just want to take a minute to recognize the research that's embedded in that text too. Zaretta Hammond, Gloria Ladson-Billings, Geneva Gay. And also we were really fortunate this past February to have Bettina Love speak on our campus. And, you know, she gave us lots of further thought regarding how to embed culturally responsive pedagogies and sustaining practices in our coursework. So just like to take a moment to give a shout out there.
For sure, for sure. We're standing on the shoulders of lots of great work. So just to remind us, we are focusing on that guideline 9, where you provide options for self-regulation. That's such a key piece of developing learners' intrinsic abilities. We want them to be able to regulate their own emotions and motivations and empower them as learners. So 9.1 focus on promoting those expectations and their beliefs that optimize motivation, right? So that they're able to establish personal goals and have some ownership and confidence in their learning. 9.2, where they can have personal coping skills. We want to facilitate that process and help them with some strategies around that so they can have healthy emotional responses and interactions and build those relationships that are so important. In 9.3, develop self-assessment and reflection. How can we help our learners to be able to be aware around their progress towards goals and how to adjust, learn from their mistakes and adjust and move themselves forward in that process? So with that, I found this graphic that I thought just kind of illustrates it nicely. Talking about stealing, Diana. So this was something I'm like, you know, I'm going to put that in there. It's great. So just it really self-regulated learning is really about doing what we do as instructors as we build things, right? And as we're thinking about our lessons, but then helping students to also do that throughout the process. So just like we plan for our lessons and we plan and set goals, right? The students as individual learners need to be taught how to do that as well. How can they plan? How can they set their own personal goals? What strategies are they going to use to approach their methods in their particular course or in their particular lesson or whatever it is that's going on, or a task, right? And so then we also want to teach them to be aware of strategies, recognize ones that have really worked for them, you know, draw from different strategies to approach different tasks, and monitor their performance. So then once they're reflecting on that performance and they're noticing that maybe, you know, where are they with their goals, that they go back and revisit their plan make some adjustments, identify different strategies, and keep that process going. And that's really empowering to a learner if they know how to do those things. Okay, so again, we kind of see as teaching students about self-regulation and giving them the skill set to do that really is empowering. So when we're setting up a course or even individual lessons, we want to have things to guide students in establishing goal-oriented behaviors. We really want students to understand in everything that we communicate to them that they're the learners, right? They're in charge of their learning process. We're there to facilitate and support it. We can talk about self-regulated learning. When you give a big task, give time to allow them a space and time to think that through. What's going to be their approach? How are they going to find motivation to get through something that like it might be overwhelming to them? How can we break it down so it's not so overwhelming? Teach them those kind of things so that they can propel themselves forward. As faculty, we certainly can use scaffolding with larger tasks so that we can break them down into smaller tasks, maybe give them little deadlines for each individual task where they can get ongoing feedback, constant opportunities to reflect on their progress, make adjustments. Using digital timesheets or whatever formats work to help students monitor their study habits. They can take a look at how much time they spent on different things. So they're learning, they're progressing as a learner in addition to moving forward in a particular task. And then Mary had talked about, she shared with me how she shares with students, approaches that have worked for her. And then she asks students and gives them the opportunity to share what their approaches are so that they can be validated and also hear other ideas. So let's just take a moment and give you all a chance to think about, where are you with this process, right? What practices do you use to promote expectations and beliefs that can help motivation? What practices do you use to facilitate personal coping skills and strategies? And what practices do you use to develop self-assessment and reflection among your students? So we have the QR code there, and it's also on the the links that you can use to think that through, or on your own, whatever you want to do. So it's really about being, thinking about these things and being deliberate about how we can facilitate the process for the learners. Okay, so that's the Padlet there. If anybody wants to utilize that, it's there for you so that for each prompt. So in the interest of time, we'll keep moving, but it is there for you. And hopefully if you have a chance to engage with that, and then it's in the link so that you'll be able to go back and take a look at it and hopefully benefit from each other's reflections. All right, so I keep talking about this humanizing learning. And part of it is, like I had mentioned, is the intentional use of social emotional learning strategies. Now, Castle has done a lot of work on this. There's a lot of research out there that really shows how social, emotional, and mental health are so foundational and critical to learning. Goes back to that affective piece again, right? So these strategies have shown that they help develop skills linked to cognitive development, self-regulation, focus, and motivation that we know is so critical to learning. It also improves relationships. So those connections can be forged so that people can feel safe in their spaces and can build confidence. And I just always like to, reiterate that research has demonstrated that social emotional components are critical to higher education students' development, adjustment, and success. I know that, I used to think about social emotional learning and I used to think about the little guys, right? But this is something that we've recognized, thankfully, that, social emotional aspects are so pivotal throughout life, obviously. And so it's been shown to really make a difference in the higher education classrooms as well. And I always just want to mention that, we need to recognize that students come to our classrooms having experiences, both good and bad, in their lives. They have things living within their bodies that are impacting them that we need to be aware of. Whether it's trauma or not, we just need to recognize that all students have things that they bring to the classroom, and it's going to impact their learning. It's going to impact them as people. And so we always need to be trauma sensitive And basically the key to being trauma sensitive is really using, it's another mindset, it's another lens that we use as we approach things. If students are demonstrating behaviors that aren't conducive to our classrooms or aren't what we're looking for, we need to look at that not as a judgment of their character, not judge their character or like what's wrong with that person, but really look at it from okay, so compassion, concern, what are some things that we can do, or what are some skills we can build within that person to help them engage in a more appropriate way, or a way that's more beneficial to them. And so we just need to recognize that, these things do live within the body. Trauma impacts learning. And so we need to be trauma sensitive. And just so you know, the things that you're doing to build connection are so pivotal to this piece. The number one anecdote to trauma is caring, stable relationships. So anything that you do in your courses or in your interactions that do that is being trauma sensitive. Okay, so anything that you can do just to be another caring presence. All right, so really what we're talking about is setting that tone, right? So in the college classroom, whether that be a physical space, an online space, or through interactions, we want the students to feel that we're assuming the best of them, right? That we believe in them and that we are in their corner, so to speak, right? So we want to support their self-regulation skills, anything that we can do to help them feel empowered. They need to know what to expect, but that they're also going to have choice in their circumstances. You want to consider barriers, such as those trauma responses that may exist, that can be present in the classroom, and then address them in our instructional design and our practices. And also check ourselves, right? Check our own mindsets, our beliefs, any biases we may have, any expectations of ourselves and others. We need to be deliberate about that as well.
Hi, Amber. I just wanted to take a minute because I'm reading the chat and they're talking
Yes.
about the youth mental health first aid training. You are a trainer.
I am a trainer in that. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Mental health is so pivotal. And so anything we can do to support each other and be on the lookout for that is beneficial. I always find it to be so motivating, all the research that shows the little things matter, right? Those caring approaches, those check-ins, just being a positive in somebody's life can make such a difference.
So Amber, the question was, at what point is it, do we have to call on experts?
Oh.
I think that's
with mental health and those pieces.
Yeah, so that's the question.
Yeah.
I think that's an important question. To really understand, when is it that it's like, what is within faculty scope of practice, and what is outside of faculty scope of practice?
Yeah, and I think that that's really, if you're doing these, if you're doing these things that we talk about today, and we've been talking about throughout these sessions, that's your scope as a faculty member, right? You're doing those things to minimize the impact of whatever's going on with the mental health or with trauma and all of those pieces. But the key is, if you can get trained in recognizing signs that are risk factors and you are getting concerned, to know where to refer. So our role is really to try to create spaces that minimize and are supportive, but then also to be able to recognize signs that are like, okay, this is beyond our scope, and to make those connections for the individual to the outside professionals. I don't know if that answers the question, but I could do a whole training on that. But yeah, it's really just to kind of be mindful, put things into place, be on the lookout, and then if you're concerned, to make those referrals. Absolutely. So part of humanizing learning is also being culturally responsive, all right? And that's all about being student-centered. All right, we need to recognize that one's culture is, who they are. It's part of who they are, right? And we all want to be respected in that. So we want to design instruction that's inclusive of all learners and all learners' cultures, from the micro to the macro, right? And so utilizing culturally responsive teaching is all about mimicking students' cultural learning preferences and tools. used by families and communities that they use to teach life skills and basic concepts. How have they been brought up? What's their norms? And use that in the education process as well. And we'll talk more about that, but it's really so that, again, in order to feel welcome and valued and a part of the space, they need to see some representation of what they're used to.
Yeah, and that's an easy, I know that for me, one of the things that, if you want to talk a little about a little +1 move that I was able to make rather easily is, just looking at the images that I was using on my website, looking at the videos that I was selecting, and they were not representing the students who were sitting in my classes. So I really needed to begin to selectively choose images that really spoke the diversity of the students who were sitting in my classes. And the same thing with the videos. Sometimes that took a little bit of extra work, but the payoff was there for the students.
Yep. And so we need to recognize that primary ways of knowledge transfer and meaning can be oral. Okay, so sometimes we get wrapped up in doing what we always do, but think about the use of rhythm, music, poems, and being actively engaged, like maybe gamify, storify, socialize. Those pieces are so pivotal. And then with humanizing learning, I said we need to talk about mindsets, all right, because those belief systems really impact the learning process. If somebody has a fixed mindset and they truly believe that their ability can only get them so far, that it's innate, it's predetermined, well, that can be very unmotivating, because as soon as something is difficult or challenging, they believe that, okay, this is beyond me, right? And that's, like I said, they lose motivation, they might stop trying very quickly. Whereas somebody who comes in thinking that, I have this intelligence and ability to this point, but I could be moved forward. And when something's challenging, that's exciting, because I know that this is an opportunity for me to get even better. That's going to make a big difference in motivation and how they approach tasks. So anything that we can do to teach our students about that and the impact that it has, and help them see the connection between their effort and the things that they're putting, the strategies they're using, and their progress, can be very beneficial.
And I would like to add to this that when Bettina Love spoke on our campus, that one of the challenges that Bettina put out there for us is to think about the language that we use to describe our students. So we tend to talk a lot about under-resourced students. And she really challenged us in terms of what message is that conveying to students and to faculty when we frequently refer to them as under-resourced.
Yeah. So some of the strategies that you can think about using is use storytelling and gaming techniques, not only in your instruction, but incorporate them into assignments as well, and assessments. So if you give them choice, give students choice to use techniques or incorporate aspects of their culture in that, they're just going to be able to produce so much more than what they would have if you tried to impose just one way on them. So, providing those choice, have varied approaches. I know in one of the webinars I attended through this thing, they made a good point of, don't necessarily replace one thing with another. Keep that choice aspect there, right? And so people are able to really express themselves and be empowered for the learning process of the way they want it to be. Social, anytime that you can allow students to collaborate or be use strategic use of competition. But I like to kind of sidebar there with that is that if you're going to use collaborative groups, then you need to have a very good plan for that in terms of what are your expectations around that? What are some of the skills that are required to do that? Maybe build in, I know when I do group projects, I ask students to, come together in their group and map out a plan for the group in terms of who's going to do what are the roles, what are the timelines, and then I ask them to submit it so I can give some feedback and for some accountability there. But just to recognize that you can't just put people in groups and say, okay, have fun. It has to be very explicit.
Absolutely. And, I talk about what does it mean to be an active listener? How are all voices heard and respected in the group? We have weekly check-ins. And for our students, because they're going to be teachers, to understand that so much in the teaching world in our K-12 public schools is really based on team efforts. So they need to understand what that collaborative process looks like. Also, by the way, working with families as partners.
Yeah. And it's a good reflection process too, for them to be able to share and vocalize the way they approach things. Some students will be honest and be like, listen, I sometimes need that deadline to keep myself motivated. So you're going to, so recognize that if I don't get something to you right away, I will. And then others can express, like, I get very anxious, so I need to know where you are with it. So they can kind of share those types of things as a group so they can work and collaborate. Another idea is that if you are sharing new information and you do something that's more quote unquote traditional, and you do a PowerPoint presentation, you can follow it very strategically and purposefully with a more responsive strategy or activity. So maybe to summarize and check that understanding of what you went over, you give them another opportunity to engage with the content differently. And obviously, you always want to embed texts and materials to be inclusive of varied experiences and perspectives. I always think about, I've watched rooms and presentations and things where people have been very one-sided on something, and I watch the room and I can see some people just literally just shutting down because they don't feel represented, or they feel like, oh, I don't belong in this space. So it's very important to be cognizant of that. Okay, so again, when you're addressing mindsets, you really want to think about helping students identify strategies that are going to help them stay motivated, and really help them to see that the things that they're doing, those efforts that they're putting in, the strategies that they're using are helping move them forward. Not over, otherwise, sometimes we naturally go to things over which we don't have control. And we blame things, things are just too overwhelming, the teacher doesn't care, like all these outside factors. And if they can bring it down to, okay, so what role do you play in it, and help them to make the connection that you do have the opportunity to make a difference in your learning, and help them to tie those things together. Be very explicit about recognizing that mistakes are important. And you welcome mistakes, and you want them to struggle, because that's when the brain is really firing. I will show them an image of a brain scan and show them one that's kind of like dull and not a lot going on, and one that's all lit up. And what's going on in the one that's lit up is that they're learning something new and they're struggling, and those neural pathways are being created. So let them know that that's the way it works. So if you're struggling, that's great. You're in process. If your brain isn't struggling, then it's something that you probably already know, and so you're not really growing. You want to be very careful about your mindset in terms of labeling or stereotyping or writing off students. Oh, that student doesn't care, right? Those kind of things. Just be very cognizant of those messages that you're sending. Truly believe in students' ability to develop and change their learning behaviors. Okay, so if a student isn't demonstrating what you're looking for, continue trying different approaches. Continue arming them with strategies so they can exhibit different behaviors. They use constructive critique, really focus on that process. And when you give feedback, we'll talk more about that. And then help them to recognize that setbacks are formative struggles in the learning process, that it's not a summative failure.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would like to add here, I just saw somebody put a comment in the chat. I'm out in the K-12 public schools in Montgomery County area with field experience students and student teachers. And one of the most joyous things that I am witnessing, down to the youngest learners in classrooms, teachers putting an emphasis on the struggle is important, that we learn through our mistakes. I don't know about the rest of you, but the last couple of years in my classroom teaching, students really are writing themselves off as failures if they're not getting an A in a class. Mm-hmm. And so I'm so hopeful what I'm seeing with these youngest learners and these amazing teachers, that they're beginning this mindset work early with our students.
And I work with doctoral students now, and this imposter syndrome, right? This idea of, oh boy, can I do this? Do I belong here? Like it's really worthwhile to take a moment and address those things.
Absolutely. Okay, so course syllabi. It's is the first contact often that we have with our students. So it's really important to think about the language and the messaging. And over the last couple of years, Amber and I have struggled somewhat with our official Cabrini syllabus because too much of the language seems so punitive, right? That, you lose points for X types of behaviors. We want to turn that around and instead focus on what the students need to do, be explicit about the expectations from the students. So clearly define those expectations and the ways that can be met. Highlight the supports that are available to them on this journey toward growth, in our case, growth as a teacher candidate, and present those projects with the chunk deadlines and ongoing feedback. Here at Cabrini, we need to embed our rubrics into our course syllabi so that another way of knowing upfront what the expectations are for the students. So that course syllabi language is so important. And I love to curate resources. So in that Padlet that I have embedded in the home-based doc, hopefully you'll see that I'm always out there gathering. I've got some great stuff on bringing that culturally responsive language into your syllabus, which is so important. I'm a huge fan of Michelle Pacansky-Brock and her Humanizing Online Learning. And I think increasingly more of us who are fans of Michelle's work are thinking about how can we bring this into our face-to-face spaces as well. Here at Cabrini, Amber and I both have used that learning management system. We only see those students physically face-to-face about 140 minutes per week, but we understand that they need supports wrapped around them during that time out of class. So we always kick off with a student survey. Again, there's some wonderful examples of student surveys out there. I tend to use one that Diane talked about, stealing like an artist. I use one that I picked up through some workshops with Michelle Pacansky-Brock, but typically in that first introductory survey, we want to get a feeling for the student's name preference. Yes, I have a liquid syllabus embedded here, a name preference, their pronoun preference, some information that they would like that instructor to know and understand about them, ways they'd like to be supported, preferred methods for feedback. I'm always amazed. I will have a number of students who will tell me, I would love video feedback, but I will still have students who will tell me, no, I would prefer that feedback to be in text, and I want to honor that preference. And this is an opportunity to use your note feature in your learning management system. I will in particular highlight those students that I sense from that survey, they're going to need a little bit of extra support this semester, maybe more frequent check-ins, etc. And this survey really has got information that can guide your instructional practices. Don't stop the surveys, though, with this first survey. Do those frequent surveys throughout the duration of your semester as check-ins with them. How are things going? Is everything, I like to use that word copacetic. They think that's so comical and funny. Or are you feeling, oh, things are beginning to mount up, Mrs. B, and I could use a little bit of support. Okay, how can I support you?
And I'll tell you, when you use the information that they share and they see it in your instructional practices, you just send a powerful message to them that you matter and that I truly am here to support you in that process. And that is so humanizing, right?
And but I will have to say this, to fill out those surveys, they are really also saying, I trust you, right?
Mm.
I trust you with this information. And sometimes initially you may not get it from them the first go round, but as you develop that connection, you will begin to get that information from them. They will trust you so that they can share it.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know how many of you have seen the TED Talk by Rita Pearson. If you haven't, you need to, but she says something in there along the lines of students aren't going to learn from teachers they don't like, and turn that around. They're not going to learn from teachers who they feel don't like them.
Absolutely.
Right. So when you're doing these things, it shows that you do value them and that you do care and that they do matter. And that just goes a long way.
Absolutely. Okay.
So some things that you can do in each individual class meeting, whether it be online or in person. And again, this is a problem when you have like the larger enrolled things, but anytime that you can personalize a welcome or a greeting, whether it be in person with an eye contact or use of a preferred name or on online spaces, anything that you can do, like even on discussion boards online, just to use their name when you're giving the feedback, just little
Jamboard.
things like that to let them be seen and that you see them as an individual. I like to begin classes with a check-in or a debrief, where sometimes I'll have a quote on that might be relevant to what we're learning about that day. Or sometimes, depending on where we are in the semester, like at this time, I might say, okay, guys, how we doing? How you feeling? Are you hanging in there? What's going on? And just let them share out where they are with things. And sometimes you can just see the kind of like, they're like, okay, they can kind of take a breath, address that, or give them a chance to, okay, where are you with your plan? Do you need some support? Like Mary said, like do you have any questions about where we are or where we're going? Because I know some students, especially, I was one of those type A students who like, if I had a question and I had to hold on to it throughout the class, I wasn't 100% engaged, right? And so anything that you can just say, okay, what's burning? What can we address real quick? Just a couple minutes, right? I've gotten a lot of feedback that's helpful.
As I said, told you earlier, our university is closing at the end of this semester, and there's tremendous sadness among our students. I'm teaching freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, and there's a lot of unknowns about where they are going next year. And they know where they're going, but for them, it feels like they're starting over. And it's just been so important every time we meet to take a few minutes to say, okay, how are we feeling today? And quite honestly, I find that I'm being very selectively vulnerable with them, because this is a time of tremendous sadness for me as well. I don't know where I'm going to be next year. And it's wonderful to be able to share that collectively as a group. They are supporting me, quite honestly, this semester, as much as when I lost my full-time position in December. Honestly, it was the students who made a point to stop by, send me emails, and check in with me. And so, we support each other. We really are a learning community. Okay.
And those are good examples of humanizing that learning, right? And so you hear a lot about exit tickets, and now you're starting to hear more and more about entry tickets. And that's something that I've always kind of used. Whether, again, it could be, I might have a quote on the board and have them reflect on it, or I might have them set their personal goals for the day based off of what they see on the agenda. You could have them reflect on something in the reading, just to kind of set the stage and to kind of promote and activate what's going to happen in our spaces. And then at the end, you can do that as well, right? With where you've gone during the time that you were together, or while they were engaging with the content, as an exit ticket, or.
And even a Katie Novak on Twitter the other day put out a suggestion of, just a little sentence statement to get them started thinking. Can be helpful for them. A sentence stem, sorry.
Yeah. And that can be a nice, when I do the little check-in debrief, and then as a nice segue into, okay, so we just did those burning things. How are they doing? But then I need to go moving into the content. And so those little activities can help kind of transition from that debrief to, okay, let's get started kind of thing.
All right, so implementation. So the next slides in the presentation, what you should see is how they align to many of the things that Amber has been discussing about goal setting, warm, supportive environments in our classroom, those spaces, those warm, supportive spaces for our students, those connections, time management, being explicit. So here is my liquid syllabus. I've been working on my liquid syllabus over probably about 4 semesters, maybe 5 semesters now. Again, I did a workshop with Michelle Pakinski-Brock, and I fell in love with this type of syllabus. I still have on my learning management system an accessible Cabrini official Word document, but this is the first syllabus that goes out to the students. There is a link also to an accessible Word document embedded in this syllabus. And it's a welcoming message to the students. As you can see, the picture that I chose is one of me with two much loved grandsons. I wanted that picture to convey something about me. I have a little video there about universal design for learning as liberatory experience and why we should be engaging in those practices. And then I like the fact that, they can pick this up, they can view this on their cell phone. And this syllabus really just, not everything that's on the official Cabrini syllabus is here. These are the essential pieces of information that they need to know about the course. And then just some syllabus language. We talked about that tone. I've been working on my syllabus language, really helping them to understand that I value them. I want them to see this as a class where they are co-designers in this class. Their voice is important to me. But I just, I do spell out some expectations and the whys behind those expectations. And on the next slide, back in 2017, when Amber and I were up at the UDL Symposium, there was an example of syllabus language from Lydia XZ Brown that I liked very much. And, you are free to use her language. You just need to attribute that language to her. The statement that I love here recognizes that there are many reasons why a student might need some adjustments. They're adults. The other thing that Lydia says is, you don't need to give me the reason. I value you. You are adults. My expectation is you have a valid reason for why you need this adjustment. There are many things that go on in our lives. I have a younger sister battling cancer right now, and that's another thing that I've had to share with the students because that has been affecting me in very profound ways. And they have really responded to that. I have fun with getting to know us because I record a video too. And right now I use Flip. It's easy for them to use. Immersive Reader is built into it. Like I said, I try to have fun with this. This past semester, this is a previous version. We used props to tell our story. What I love about them is I can watch the number of other students who are viewing each other's videos. And here's the other thing. I remember names and faces after I have viewed these videos. So they're very helpful to me as well. I do like predictable course structure. I do think that what we've talked about today is we know our students respond to this. We have a 15-week semester. I chunk this into 3 units, so the work is not overwhelming for them. There are weekly lesson plans, and those lesson plans, there's a very predictable structure. I have the learning goals, and those goals have to tie into the Pennsylvania Department of Education competencies, of which there are so many. I have selection of learning materials. That's that representation. I have taken this, Katie Novak, so I call it read, watch, listen, and view. And it's a buffet of options. They get to have some choice. They're self-regulating their own learning there. And again, just making lots of tools available to them. They tend to pick tools that they are comfortable with, but I also encourage them to, so for instance, we have one project, I know they know Pinterest. So I encourage them to select a different tool, but I provide the tutorials and the support behind that tool so that they're also growing in their use of instructional technologies. And I love announcements. Sometimes I have to pull back a little bit and not overwhelm them with announcements. But we use announcements for reminders. I was sharing with Amber that a year ago for our field experience, a lot of the field supervisors were complaining that all of the students were not turning their work in a timely way. And I sat there and I thought, well, how about if I just right now create announcements? I'll set them in learning management system to go out predictably. They go out the Friday before, when assignments are due on a Wednesday by 11:59 p.m. And they worked. Many of the supervisors said, you know what? They are getting their work in on time. Thank you. And the students appreciated it too, because one week the announcement didn't go out and they sent me emails asking me where the announcement was. So I knew that they were paying attention to them. Assessment information, what I say in class is not always remembered. So I like to follow up with an announcement. By the way, I also set those announcements to go out as emails because not every student checks the announcements. So I think, okay, there's a backup email. Use them as weekly introductions to the coursework. I try to make them sound fun. Hey, this week, did you know we are going to be talking about X, Y, and Z? And then I also like to use the announcements to encourage and connect with them. And then again, this is an example of an announcement that I put out. Just a little word of encouragement. We're coming to the end. I know that they can do it. I'm here to continue to support and coach, and in some cases challenge them. This is just an example of a weekly schedule that I have. They don't have to follow this schedule. Some of them, there's just enough ideas there that they can develop their own weekly schedule. Other students tell me that they love this weekly schedule and they find it very helpful. But I think it's important to model these explicit strategies for them. And then personal goal setting. So Amber talked about the idea that it's not just the goals. I don't want it to be top down. I want them to really see an authentic connection, a purpose for these goals. So we have different ways that we can do that. A lot of times I just embed it as a quick journal activity. You read the lesson plan, you know what I've identified as the goals that tie into the PDA competencies for you as a teacher candidate. What's your personal goal? And so a good example is when we began our lessons on universal design for learning, many of them, the personal goal tied in with, well, I'm in field experience right now, and I'm seeing that diversity represented in my classrooms. Wow. So my personal goal is I really want to learn about UDL so that when I get hired in a school, I know how to support the learner variability in my spaces. I love video. Again, Michelle Pacansky-Brock and Karen Costa tell us video does not have to be perfect. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of value to imperfect video. So maybe you shoot a quick video on your cell phone where you're excitedly introducing them to the week's content. Video feedback. Many of my students, probably 2/3 of them this semester, actually told me that they preferred video feedback. They like seeing my face. Short, quick micro lectures. And finally, great ways to demonstrate. Of course, Diana would appreciate early intervention course. A lot of first generation students last semester, I found myself shooting just little quick videos that said, for instance, how to find a discussion board on the learning management system. I love this work by Lindsay Maslin on tiered feedback. Level 1, everybody, there's a rubric. Level 2, if you feel that you need feedback past a rubric, I will annotate that assignment for you. And if you continue to need additional feedback, we can either jump into a Zoom session or we can meet face-to-face to discuss your assignment. And then wise feedback. Remember, wise feedback is warm and supportive. It begins with the positives. It provides constructive feedback. It conveys this sense that I know you can do this. And again, it just strengthens those connections of trust and belonging. Nice little article from Temple University. Flexible due dates, the previous slide. I like them to know that, they always can ask for an extension. There's a Google form that they can fill out. Okay.
Right. So we are at time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to
Yep.
thank people are starting to drop out, but
Yep.
people want to stay on for a minute. We'll certainly
Yep.
stay on for a minute.
Thank you.
And really appreciate all these resources. We put the links in the chat several different times. And they will be available. We'll add your PowerPoint to the Padlet, which we've shared the Padlet link. You're getting lots of thank yous and wishes we had time for questions at the end.
No.
So
Reach out to us with questions. We welcome it.
yeah, definitely, definitely. So thank you again for your time. And this was incredible. The number of resources, absolutely outstanding. We really appreciate your efforts and look forward to collaborating. And again, we have that conference coming up in September, and hope you'll make it to Connecticut to see us at the conference. So thanks to everybody who's still here. We appreciate your participation, and we will get that link on our Padlet
Thank you.
sooner than later. So
Thank
thanks,
you.
everybody.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you
thanks
your
for
lovely
being here.
comments. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.